Welcome everybody to BT's Friday night tying. This is Al and Gretchen Beatty, and we welcome you all here. Tonight we're going to be featuring some of the two of the flies from LaFontaine's legacy book that we did. I'm going to be doing the twist nymph, and Al will be tying the double wing dry fly. And we'll both be using some double magic techniques. Now the fly I'm tying is really a simple fly.
You want to go to the recipe first?
Yeah, that would be great.
There you go.
Now I thought it's 8 to 18. Al has 10 to 20, and I'm going to be tying it on a 2X dry fly hook. I'm going to use gray thread, 2 ostrich herl tips for the tail. The abdomen is gray ostrich herl and double magic dubbing. We're going to do that with the dubbing loop. And the dubbing is the orange double magic. So it's synthetic with, it's nylon synthetic with Antron in it for highlights. You can do a wing case, which is optional. I'm not going to do that because we really don't do the wing case on the ones that we tie for our own purposes. And the thorax is gray ostrich herl. We've got a whole bunch of material here tonight because we have material for 2 flies. But what I'm going to be using is this double magic, my gray thread, my ostrich herls, dubbing wax, of course, and that's it. Oh, hooks, of course. It is just so simple. But here it is. This is our map of where we want to go. Now, what you want to do, we're going to do a base wrap starting at the 1/2 point. However, you want to take enough thread out.
Down. There you go.
So that you're going to have some thread to use later. However, I am not going to use the thread that I pulled out because I want to use red thread so that you can see it. So when I do my little trick later on. So we're going to do a base wrap. Come right to there. Let's go back to the beginning. And the reason I like to stop right here at the 1/2 point is because it marks where I'm going to end the abdomen. So now we'll trim off the waist, and you'll want to save that. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is tie on the tail. And I have taken from this ostrich, I like the stuff for the tail, the stuff that's down here. So that's where I'm going to take the ostrich herls for my tail. Now, when I tie on the tail, I hold these pretty tight together. And I'm going to measure about half the length of the shank. We'll set it in. And I'm going to hold it down and towards me so that the thread torque is going to set it on. Now, as I get close to the back, to the bend where I'm going to stop, I want to make pretty loose wraps. That gives me a foundation that then I can tighten my wraps and ratchet down and really hold it in place. And we'll trim off the waist. Okay, I'm going to get my red thread out. I cut some red thread earlier so that I could show you this little trick, and it'll show up a little better than the gray. And what I like to do is be sure to kind of move your thread out of the way a bit. Makes it easier to get this thread where you want it. We're going to bring it around through the bend and pull it back. Now, I like to twist it just a little bit. It just helps me get it into the tail where I want it. Take the bodkin, separate my tail and just bring this in here. I'm not going to bring it all the way yet. I'm going to take it and hold this thread in place with my finger and thumb, and then I'm going to hold it with this. And that maybe seem like a little overkill, but I've had trouble with the tails escaping. So now however much you pull it will indicate how far it's going to be apart. I think about like that's good. I've got that all twisted up, so I'm going to get rid of it. There again, I want to do fairly loose, careful turns as I approach the tail. There's my divided tail. My tail might be a little longer than I normally tie. I'm not sure why that happened, but I don't think the fish care. I tie it in by the tips, and I like to fluff it up a little bit. Now, one of the things you have to watch out for on this fly, and I know this from experience, is getting the tail caught in these hurls, because then it ends up in the dubbing loop and you go, oh, what happened to part of my tail? So you need to be careful. I'm going to use some dubbing wax. And we've gone through the dubbing wax routine, I think, enough. I probably don't need to do that. So I'm going to wax my thread good. I'm going to leave my thread back here. Okay, now we're just going to twist this. And I'll just keep kind of twisting it a bit as I wrap it. And that's all there is to the double magic in a dubbing loop. The thorax, we're going to use 4 of those ostrich hurls. And there again, I like to take them and fluff them up. They just don't show up good if you don't do that. If you have a real fluffy, good hurl, it probably isn't necessary, but with this one, it seems to be necessary. Tie it on. I want to put a base wrap under there a bit. And then I'm going to end it right where I want the head. Clean that up just a little bit there. Stroke those again. I've got one short one that keeps getting away from me. Just take 2 wraps. I'm going to push this back a bit. Now I'm going to do a good whip finish, which means I'm going to start back from the eye. My whip finish tool and capture it. We want to do 5. Did I do 5 or did I just do 3? I'm going to do 3. Okay, there we go. And that's the twist nymph.
Now, this is a road map, and that's a double wing. In fact, it's the Lady Heather double wing, and I'd like to read you some stuff from the book that Gary wrote that he asked that we publish along with it. Why don't you? Let's see here. On page 111, I think it is.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I want to start.
110.
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, 110 is where the chapter starts. But on 111, Gary wrote the couple of pages that he wanted to have inserted into this book, the LaFontaine's Legacy book. Anyway, there is a formula for attractor dry flies, and it applies not only to double wings, but to wolves, trudes, humpies, stimulators, or any style of attractor that comes in a series of colors. The formula is deceptively simple, but it will increase the catch rate for attractors by 20 to 30%. Here's the formula, match the main color of the attractor dry fly to the color of the prevalent light. And we've talked about this in the past. Gary's theory of attraction was basically put something in your fly that matches the environment. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But I wanted to also read to you on the next page, he had 12 double wings, and they were just all the same fly with different color combinations and where to use them. And I'm not going to read all 12 to you, but the first one on the list is the lime double wing, lime green. And he wrote, it's an excellent pattern around vegetations. Plants reflect a lot of green light. And then the one I'm tying tonight was the last one that he developed. It was called the Lady Heather double wing, and he named it after his daughter, Heather. And anyway, this is a great, great attractor for those days that photographers call cloudy bright. Clouds cover everything, but there is enough light coming through so that everything isn't dark gray. Use the Lady Heather on these days. And we put a note of our own. We found this fly fishes really well in a couple of tight canyons where the light is not directly on the stream except for a short time in the middle of the day. And that's just
I think one
of
of
the
those was the Black Canyon in Colorado, wasn't it?
yeah, parts of the Black Canyon. Yep. But let me put that book aside.
Been a while since we've been there, but yeah.
And I'm going to use some floss along with the gray thread that Gretchen had. So I'll just set that over at the fly tying vise. We're going to be using some Lure Flash Antron body wall. In other words, some Antron. I'm going to be using some Double Magic, calf tail, and some deer hair. And as always, I've done this just before we started tonight, but I sprayed everything down with static electricity because we're headed into winter, and the dryness of the Rocky Mountain West, even though it's raining outside right now, the dryness is really generates a lot of static electricity. I'm going to start here about 1/3 back from the hook eye and wrap back a short distance with my floss. Just trim that off. I usually put a thread base under all of my tails, except if it's really a hard material, then it's not quite so important. We've talked about this before. And this happens to be the Antron yarn, that's the tail. And I'm going to double this over. Now I want you to notice that I did not tie it in the center and fold it over. That's because it creates a little bump there that I didn't want. So if I tie it in like I just did, then I have a nice smooth point right here instead of a fold over point right there where I'd tied the material in the center and then folded it back to tie it. But anyway, we'll wrap to the back here. Now the reason I started with floss, most people probably wouldn't, but I wanted to build the next part of the fly, which is the tag. Now, looking at the recipe, you can see where we are right now, and I'm working on the tip or the tag or whatever it's called out of gray floss. And then the rear wing is going to be natural deer. We'll have body hackle, which is grizzly. And Gary always clipped it top and bottom, and I don't. So it's just one of the things where we do it different. The body is tan, double magic dubbing. We're going to have a white calf tail wing and a grizzly and dun mixed hackle, and that'll be some fun, and we'll have some fun with that when we get to that. But back at the vise, I want to wrap this forward, my tag, if you will, or my tip. Gary called it a tip. But anyway, it's a transition period between the double wing and the tail. I'm going to come up here and just tie this off because I want to take a little detour from what we're doing right now and talk about the fly tying process that everybody does from the first fly they tie to the last one they tie on this earth. And so few people recognize what a powerful tool it is in their bag of fly tying tricks. It's called a crisscross wrap. And I know everybody says, oh, I know what a crisscross wrap is, but let's take a good hard look at it. And I cut that floss off, and I'm just going to temporarily stick some black thread on here so we can talk about that. Because when I wrap materials on the hook, you can see right here, you get a pretty good delineation between the gray and the black as I'm wrapping. I'm going around the hook, up and over. There's only two ways to go on the hook, up and over or the other way. And I'm still going up and over, but I want you to notice things are crossing over right now. And I'm still going in the same direction. Now, how can you explain that? Well, they cross it on the top and on the bottom, and you can use that to your advantage. And how you use that to your advantage is one of the things that we're going to. Now, I want you to watch. I'm not going to bring it to your attention until we get a little further down the road, but I want you to notice every place that I use a crisscross wrap to improve durability of the fly that I'm tying right now, the Lady Heather double wing. So let's set that aside. I need gray thread. And we're going to get over here and get a piece of this deer hair. There you go, D-camera. And I've got a choice, and I'm not going to get into a lot of stuff on deer hair, but I do need to talk about selecting hair. Now, this is a picture of a hide. I just got it off the internet, printed it so that we could look at. This is a white-tailed deer. I want you to notice that there's a dark strip down the back. It probably is 6-8 inches wide all the way along the backbone, and then it's lighter colored hair down towards the rib on both sides. Lighter colored hair, spinning hair, wings and tails in the darker hair. And at another time, when we really get into a lot of tying with hair, I'll go into that in more detail. But for now, that's all we need to worry about. And I want you to notice that I've got one piece of hair here that's right off the backbone. Perfect stuff for wings and tails. But the wing on the double wing should be flared just a little bit. So on this particular animal, there was a space here of about this much that you see right here between the backbone and this next piece right here. And you can see it's a little darker here and it's really light over here. Well, I'm going to use some of this darker hair that's got light on it to make my first wing on the fly. And you see how I just kind of lift that all up with my scissors and decide how much I want and then get it out. And I want you to notice also the way you clean this is you never stroke and try to pull it out. It'll create static electricity, and we were just trying to get rid of that. The way you get rid of it is rapidly running your finger up and down through the waste ends and over a wastebasket. I don't want to get it all over the materials here, so I'm going to move off camera, clean that out, and I'll see you back over at the vise. Okay, well, I'm back over here at the vise. Now I want to have in this wing about half of what I would normally have in any hair wing, which would be, you've already seen this routine, this gather, 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 pinch. And then you compare it to the gap of the hook, and it should be the gap of the hook would be about the properly proportioned wing. Well, I've got less than that right now. I should pull some more of that out. Gather, 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 pinch. And that's about half. That's what I want, because we're going to have a double wing. And if I put two of the regular size on, really overloads this fly. Now I'm going to slip this into my hair stacker. Okay. Can I tell you how many times I see people do this? They always take the hair out of the stacker in the same direction. And on this particular fly, because the wing is going to go this way, well, it's fine to take it out that way. But I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people that are going to put wings on that are supposed to be going the other way. You take them out of the stacker the way they always do. And then they, oh darn, well, then they get over here and they have to turn it around, and they get it turned around, and then it's unstacked. Well, I'm going to restack this and show you. You take the wings out of the stacker, or the tail material out of the stacker in the direction you're going to use it. Tails or crude wings, upright wings that are going to be pointing forward. I could apologize for my hair stacker, but I'm not going to. It's been my best buddy for 40 some years. So
I thought I was your best buddy.
no, you're my wife and my best buddy. The stacker and I have been together longer than you and I have. I'm sorry to tell you this. Okay, I'm going to share a little trick with you here. Some of you have seen this before, and some of you haven't. Here is an area where you get into problems, and I'm going to temporarily use this waist back here towards the butt end of the hair to illustrate my point. So I go to tie this on, and I bail down into it. Oh, rats. Now I'm going to have to try to start wrapping to the back, and I'm snagging in all the hair that I flared up here. It's in my way. Let me show you the trick. Let's undo this. Now you can ignore that stuff because I was just illustrating with the butt ends. Let's get down here now and measure our wing for length. It comes out to the end of the tail. Now let's tie it on the hook using softer wraps. See that only flared just a little bit? I can go ahead now and wrap back a couple more turns, and now I bail into it and really tighten up. That's what's really holding it. We'll deal with those softer wraps here in a minute. And now I'll start wrapping towards the hook bend, but I got to stop at a point even with the point of the hook, and that's where my wing is over where the tag is. You can see right there, and the tail. Now I'm going to trim this off, and I'll advance my thread forward again. And you remember these soft wraps up here? I'll just bail into them right now, and they're not bothering me any after I went ahead and cut the waist ends of the hair off. Otherwise, it would have been flared back in my way. Any questions up to this point?
We have a question about the book. That's what I was kind of.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the book's.
And then we're talking about the fact that the early version was gray, and this is the most recent version. And what it is the early version was published by Global.
Yeah, Nick Lyons, Globe Cut.
Yeah. And then after they sold them, they gave us the rights to the book, and we published it through Amazon. And that's this cover.
In fact, let's talk about that for a minute. Let's totally take a trip away from tying flies for a minute, and we'll talk about the business of publishing. A couple of our first books, we were neophytes, and we were just thrilled that somebody would publish the darn things. We didn't know too much about the business side, and we didn't have one little clause in the contract that later Lefty Craig clued us in and said, whatever you do, kid, make darn sure you have this clause in your contract. And we did after that. And that clause is, at the end of a certain amount of time, the rights to the book revert to the author, us. And we've got several books out there now that we could republish, except that clause was not in the contract, and we're stuck unable to republish. Since there's a certain amount of dollars in republishing one. Anyway, with this one, after 10 years, we got the rights back. So we published the book in 06. I think it was 05 or 6, I forget which. And anyway, it was 15 or 16. We got the rights to the book back. The legal department at Nick Lyons Press sent us the release, and we were then allowed to go out and republish it ourselves. And it's still a very good seller, even though it's doesn't warrant a publishing company go out and spending the thousands of dollars they would to have a huge amount of books on a third or fourth printing done. But now, so if any of you get into publishing, whatever you do, make sure your contract has a clause in there that you get the rights to the book back after a certain length of time.
So that was the one question we hadn't answered in the chat. So
Okay, good.
I'll keep looking at the chat if you have any questions.
All right, let's see, what do I want to do now? Oh, yeah, okay. I need to reach over here to the materials area and get my hackle. And I went ahead and picked this hackle out and sized it because, well, quite frankly, I was getting so much stuff laying down here in the materials area, I couldn't find anything. So I just got it sized and I put them in a couple of clips and I'll set them over at the vise. We'll get back here. Now the body hackle is a grizzly. So I will set those back down in their clip and I'll take this one grizzly hackle. Now remember, you're supposed to see the crisscross wraps and where we can use those to improve the durability of our fly. It's a very powerful tool and there's a lot of ways you can use it. So just remember, I'm kind of giving you a heads up if you hadn't figured it out by now. All right, I'm going to put on the body. I'm going to dub just exactly like Gary did. I'm just putting a little bit of wax on the thread. One of the cool things about dubbing this way is when you got a camera between you and me, I don't have to dink around trying to twist this stuff into place because this is the way Gary dubbed it. Just touched it on there and now it's time to wrap. Okay, let's do it.
We had a lot of discussions.
We had a lot of discussions about this, and you know what? He says, I've never had this stuff come loose. Doesn't that make a nice fuzzy looking body? Well, what happens is the natural twist that goes into your thread grabs the fibers of dubbing as you wrap, and it's there. Yeah, there'll be a loose fiber here and there, but see how it also fluffs around? It sparkles in the sun, and it even has sparklies on into the hackle that I'm going to wrap right now, the body hackle. And now it's time for crisscross wraps. I wonder what it's doing to that hackle. Do you think it might be stronger? Now I'm just going to twist this back here like this. I don't want to cut that hackle. I just want to break it with a notch of my scissors. There we go. Now, as I said, Gary always cut this top and bottom, and I got to be honest with you, I never could see a reason for it, so I never did that. And we eventually convinced him he didn't need to have it. And when Paul Stimson and I were tying for his company, hey, would you reach up there and get that calf tail for me, Gretch? Mine's too short. We're tying for his company. We did it on longer hooks because we convinced him that was a good thing. And we also didn't trim the hackle. And the other thing I find is funny is we all have a loose screw. Now think about this. This is, I don't know why this just popped into my mind, but my head it did. We wrap thread around a hook to capture materials, to try to imitate insects, to freeze our butt off in cold water to go out and catch a trout or whatever we're trying to do, to turn it loose. Does that make any sense? Well, I mean, I'm not going to change anything, but it seems like kind of an odd thing to me.
Well, my dad never did understand catch and release.
Yeah. All right. We're coming up at a potential another problem, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm just going to tie this on my wing with some tight wraps. I want a wing that sets up fairly high. And I'm going to trim this out of here. And it's really important to not create a hill. Talk to you about that in a minute. All right, and we do have a bit of a hill. Not much, but if I had overdressed this wing, I would have had a problem. And the hill is right there where my pointer is. Let me just zero in real quick here. Let me move my cursor over and we'll zero in on that so you can see. Right there. And it's not much because I've been very careful to try to avoid it. But let's say that you maybe messed up and you got a little bit too much of a bump right here where I'm pointing. I'll show you a trick to fix it and a way to wrap hackle that makes it more durable. And remember, now we're going to be mixing dun and grizzly. So let me get a hackle here out of the dun hackles bunch. Let's see, that looks like that's long enough. Now, normally you would take and tie your two feathers on here at the back and wrap them forward and tie them off. I'm not going to do that. I am going to fill in this valley below the hill a little bit with the stem from the feather that I'm going to tie on here at the front. And that will help smooth out that hill, if you will, and make it a lot easier to wrap my hackle over. Now I'll take my thumbnail and push that stem right up there so it comes in line with the wing, and it helps fill in that area and smooths out the transition on the hackle platform that I'm building. Now the second thing I'm going to do is get a grizzly feather. That one looks pretty good. And I'm going to wrap it on it or tie it on. Where this one is tied on the top of the hook, I'll tie this one on at the bottom. Okay. Now I'm going to start with the dun hackle, and I'm going to wrap back. Now, two things are going to happen here. I'm going to climb the hill rather than try to slide down the hill. If you wrap down the hill and you have a little bit more of a cliff there than you really wanted, your hackle is going to slip every time. But often you can climb the hill a lot easier than you can come down the hill. And look what I'm doing here. Remember those crisscross wraps? What's it doing to that hackle that I was worried about having slip? It's not going to slip, is it? It's anchored in place. Now I'm going to break off my feather. Now I'm going to wrap the second hackle, and it's going to also help anchor in the first hackle. And of course, it's not going to slip because the first hackle is anchored by the thread. And I'm only tying off one feather right at the hook eye, so I'll have a lot less of a problem with too big of a gobby head because I was tying two feathers off there. Now, I think all of you have seen our routine about messing a fly up, so I'm just going to go ahead and build a nice small head. I've anchored the feather with 3 turns of thread. I'm just going to pull this back now and wrap a jam knot and a thread head that pushes the hackle back. All right, now we're coming right into, see how it pushes that hackle back? It also sets me up for a good whip finish. And a good whip finish, if you remember from last week, is one that starts at the back of the head and each subsequent turn gets closer to the hook eye. So back on the head. Each turn closer to the hook eye until the 4th turn is right at the hook eye. And I'll just trim this off, and I don't cut it. I just catch it in the V of the scissor points. And the same thing with the feather. I just get the V of the scissor points and break it off. And what it does is it leaves behind the little stubs right around that cut off stem. And that's fine. That's all part of the hackle that you see right here. Okay, we promised a tip each week. Last week I showed you the mud flap eyes for melted monofilament eyes. And the only problem with that is that the stalks of that off that mud flap are large enough that they make really great eyes on flies down to about a size 12. And below a size 12, it gets kind of big. And I've never really had a good source. And I went to sweep some stuff out of the garage this last week. Amazing the things you'll find in your fly tying room. But this guy right here has got red ones and black ones. Whoops, and black ones right here. And I want to show you some of those because one is an absolute fantastic for eyes, and the other one, well, we'll let you draw your own conclusion. Let's go back here to the vise, and I'll just set this fly out of the way for the moment. And first off, this is last week's eyes that we made. I think you all remember those, and they melted up really nice. I'll set that down. Get my flame out here. And this is just some stuff that I cut off of that push broom. And in fact, let's get one of the red ones out here first. I'll just pull that out, set these others down, and let's see how that burns or how that melts. Oh, wow, hot. Whew. Anyway, you understand, it goes quick. Doesn't work out so well as, let's try the black one now. And I want you to notice too that in dimension, these are a little bit smaller. Not a lot, but enough smaller that they'll make some pretty good eyes down to a 16.
Why don't you hold that with your clip instead of your hand?
That's a dang good idea.
That's my tip tonight.
Yeah, okay. I'll give this a melt.
We got lots of safety tips tonight too.
Oh yeah. I want you to notice what a nice eye this thing makes. Just like the one last week. Perfectly round. It doesn't droop and melt and run. It doesn't catch on fire. So it's a look at your push broom now. So I got this grand idea. I said, oh God, I got two push brooms in the garage. What does the other one have? Well, it's got fibers that look like this. In fact, one of these looks like a pine needle. That's because I was sweeping pine needles up in the driveway, and it is a pine needle. So I'll just lay that pine needle down. But here is it's some kind of a natural fiber. I better put that in the clip because I already know what it's going to do. Get back here. And it's not going to melt, I'm pretty sure. Hot. Oh, yeah. Okay. So you know that not all of them will do. You want to look for one that's got the really black plastic type fibers. And it may.
What if you do the red and the black together?
Well, I don't know. You're just trying to get me burned. I know what's going on here, woman.
Just got to thinking that might be kind of cool.
All right, let's
Keep it in the clip.
see what happens here. Well, the red one takes off and the black one is still.
Oh, I thought maybe they'd go together, but they
No,
don't.
they sure don't. That red one just keeps moving a little bit further away. And every time I touch it with a flame, the red one moves farther away from the flame than the black one. So anyway, there's the tip for this week. And before you go, next week, we're going to have Kathy Burns and John Kreft as guest tires. And we'll probably throw something into the mix as well. But if there are no other questions, you all have a pleasant Friday evening.